This video covers the IGCSE Biology Objective 9.2.1 on the 2025 CAIE syllabus to identify the structures of the mammalian heart. So before we get to the mammalian heart, let's just take a look at some examples of hearts. Now, typically in a diagram where we're looking at the circulatory system, we have blue lines and blue sections of the heart that represent deoxygenated blood, and red tubes and arrows and sections of the heart that represent oxygenated blood. And then sometimes we have this mixture of blood that can happen in some animals. So we have a three-chambered heart in amphibians and in reptiles, with a slight difference between the type of three chambers that they have. And you can see in the amphibian that like a frog, for example, that the third chamber is just basically a mix of the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. And so animals like that, like frogs and newts, have to come up with very efficient ways of getting oxygen to their body cells because of this mixing. And later on we'll learn why this is a problem. In reptiles like turtles, for example, the third chamber is what's called septated. You can see there's almost a complete wall between that third chamber, but there's still an opening, and so blood can mix a little bit less than in the amphibians, but it still can mix a bit. So again, not as efficient as in birds and mammals, where we have a four-chambered heart and the blood stays completely separate, where deoxygenated blood going to the lungs is separate from oxygenated blood going to the body tissue. So let's just talk about the sides of the heart, because this is going to be important when you are looking at diagrams and when you're looking at the heart. So even though on the piece of paper or in the image, the left side of the page or the left side of the video has deoxygenated blood, it is in fact the right side of the heart. Okay, and that is oxygen poor blood or deoxygenated blood. So the right side of the heart is on the left side of the page, and the left side of the heart is on the right side of the page, and this is where we find the oxygen-rich blood. This is very important to remember when you're doing labeling, and we're going to see that in a minute. So how do we think about this? Well, think about it as if the heart is actually inside of you, the person. So it's not facing the way it looks on the paper, but what you're looking at is as if the heart was inside a person. And so if you remember that, then you will remember the correct sides of the heart, because you will need to do that to label the correct parts. So let's talk about the structures of the heart. What are the structures that at this level of biology you need to know? Well, first of all, we can see that in a mammalian heart there are four sections outlined here in black. The top portion of the heart, the top two chambers, are called the atria, which is plural. Each one individually is called an atrium. And the lower chambers are called ventricles, and they kind of have a V shape to the chamber, so that is a way to remember that the lower chambers are the ventricles and the upper chambers are the atrium. So how do we label each of these chambers? Well, we would label them right atrium and right ventricle, and left atrium and left ventricle. Remember, the sides of the heart are going to play a part in the labeling, so you have to remember which side is which. Additionally, you need to take note of the muscular wall of the ventricles, especially the left ventricle. And when you look at an actual heart, you will see that the left ventricle wall is thicker than the right ventricle wall. Even in this diagram, you can see it a bit. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in another video. Additionally, this portion that separates the left from the right side is called the septum. You should be able to label that as well. Again, a very thick muscular component to the heart. The other thing that you do need to be aware of are these little white bits that we see between the chambers, and those are one-way valves. And we can see in the little animation how the valves work. As blood is pumped from the atrium into the ventricle, the valves will open to allow blood to move through, and then they close. Then blood is pumped from the ventricles out into the pulmonary artery or the aorta, which are the tubes that take the blood to the lungs and to the body respectively. And then those valves would open to allow the blood to pass through, and then they close. And again, we will get into a little bit later the importance of these valves. For now, you just need to be able to label the parts. They're one-way valves. So here we have images and a picture of an actual human heart. Now, the front part of the heart, which is on the left, and the back part of the heart, or the face, the front face and the rear face of the heart, the rear face is on the right, have specific arteries that are situated in such a way that you can look at the side of the heart and know if you're looking at the front or the rear face of the heart. These are called the coronary arteries, and the lines are pointing to those arteries. So on the front of the heart, the artery runs diagonally across the front of the heart, whereas on the back side of the heart, that artery, the coronary artery on the back, runs vertical from top to bottom. So that's how you can tell the difference between the front and the back of the heart if you needed to do that for a dissection. So the coronary arteries are very important arteries. These arteries are going to bring oxygenated blood directly to the heart muscle cells. So the blood that is moving through the heart is not going into the muscle cells. That requires a specific artery to get the oxygenated blood into capillaries to those tissues, and so that is called the coronary artery. So we will talk more about the coronary artery when we get into talking about heart diseases, because this is the artery that feeds the heart, and if there's problems with this artery, then it can result in problems for the heart.